This is Golden Years, a roadmap to navigate retirement with Mark Cordner, the podcast.
Personal finance guru Susie Orman spoke recently about a list that she says that should take some of the fear and the scariness about all these crazy headlines we're seeing about Social Security. I'm going to run down her list, Mark, then I want to get your point of view here. Social Security will not run out of money, she says. Number 2, if they raise the retirement age, it will not affect those on the verge of retirement. Number 3, if you want a bigger check, just wait till you're 70. Number 4, if you need the money sooner, go ahead and take it. It's your choice. Number 5, married couples have a number of strategies that can help increase benefits. Do you agree with this list? Is there something you would add? Just give me all your thoughts here.
Yeah, I actually do agree with it. I appreciate what she's contributing in this respect. There is a lot of fear out there about Social Security. There's been so much talk about how in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to hit a point where they're going to have to reduce benefits by 25%. And she's correct that is a reduction, but it's not a complete elimination of the benefit. But I personally don't believe that's going to happen exactly like that. I think it's too much of a political hot potato for our politicians to allow that. I think we have precedent, actually, historically. If we go back in many of our lifetimes, in 1983, we recall how Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill came together for that great compromise that saved Social Security, when back then they feared it going under within a matter of months. And as we recall, what they did at that time was they made some concessions. They took the retirement claiming age from 65 up to 67 gradually. They phased that in over time. So now anyone born after 1960 now has a, quote, full retirement age of age 67. And they also started to tax Social Security, whereas prior to 1983, Social Security benefits were not taxed. So I think that the math is going to force the politicians to the table. They're going to have to deal with these issues, and it's going to be just like in 1983. They're not going to do it happily, but they're going to claim a lot of credit after they save the problem they created. But I think we're going to see full taxation of Social Security. I think we're going to see an extension of benefits to a later age. You know, if they would index this to life expectancy, that would solve a lot of the problems. But we know that's not politically popular. I mean, look what just happened in France. You know, this last year, the president of France wanted to increase the retirement age from 62 to 64. And they literally had riots in the streets, you know, flipping cars over and firebombs and all this crazy stuff. But they did it. They raised it to 64 the way they needed to. And frankly, they need to increase it beyond that because they're having a bunch of problems there in other European countries that I track. And so we have the same principle here. We have aging populations around the world. We can wait until a later age, like 70, to get a greater benefit, but we have to look at the mathematical ideal versus the practical reality. And almost always it makes the most sense mathematically to claim at age 70. But for practical reasons, people often will claim earlier, and it's a more complicated picture for married couples. So we invite them to come in, and I'll give that offer to our listeners. We'll do a free Social Security analysis for you. You know, you can go online to various places and pay a couple $100 and get these reports. We'll do it for you for free because people need to know what their options are so they can make an informed decision if they're going to wait or not. One of the key issues that people forget to talk about, and Susie did not mention, is that if we delay taking Social Security to age 70 and we've retired earlier, that means we're going to have to spend our own assets. And if we spend our own assets, that means that we cannot give those assets to our loved ones when we pass on. And so that's one of the practical considerations that people have to look at is since Social Security cannot be passed on to our children or grandchildren as an inheritance, you got to decide, are you going to spend your money or spend the government's money? Unfortunately, too many people take that to the extreme, and most Americans claim at age 62, which is generally not the best thing to do. But I'm generally optimistic. I think the problems with Social Security absolutely can be fixed if we would just have the politicians with the willpower to do what common sense tells them should be done. The answers are out there. It's just a question if they'll have the willpower to do it. But yes, if you're within 10, 15 years of retirement, don't panic. They're typically looking at our kids to impose those new rules on them. And those quickly approaching retirement usually will not be affected by near-term changes.
You were talking just a few moments ago about, how Social Security should be used to pay for health care and long-term care. these prices are out of control. There was actually a recent study done by Fidelity that found the average 65-year-old couple will spend a whopping $315,000 on healthcare costs during their retirement. So when you break it down, of course, women will need at least an extra maybe 15 grand or so because we tend to live longer than you guys. So how do you factor in the cost of healthcare within that retirement plan?
Well, it absolutely has to be a consideration. So a big part of that is the Medicare planning, because Medicare is the health insurance plan for people age 65 and over. Most all of us have paid into this over the years. But Medicare is actually a wonderful program. It does not cover everything, however, and that's exactly what that Fidelity study is getting at, is that the average married couple is looking at $315,000 in cost over the course of their retirement, which does not mean they need $315,000 set up on day one, but they should anticipate cash flowing that over the course of their retirement. And you're right, it's a bigger issue for women. And so it starts off with Medicare planning, and we have specialists on our team that can help with that. There are different kinds of plans, your Medicare supplements, your Medicare Advantage plans. You've got dental and vision and hearing and things that have to be considered there. But I think the bigger issue, by far the bigger issue, since Medicare is so readily available to almost everyone that's worked, is this long-term care consideration, because that $315,000 that Fidelity is speaking about does not address the custodial care that's needed as we become frail due to age, or if we become dependent due to an illness or an injury. I mean, I'm thinking Michael J. Fox. I'm thinking Christopher Reeves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've seen these very public, wonderful people who have been waylaid in the prime of life because of accidents and illness. These things can happen at any age, and 3 out of 4 Americans are going to need hands-on assistance at some point in their life. This is the number one, mark my words, the number one social health care crisis of our time. And that's a big thing to say right after the COVID pandemic. But when you think, again, 3/4 of us being affected by this, and the average cost across the country right now is between $90,000 and $100,000 a year for care. So obviously average means some forms of care are going to be less expensive, some are going to be more expensive. But that's a big hit for most people's retirement plan, and most Americans have not prepared for it. Matter of fact, the studies show that 3% of Americans have even prepared for long-term care, even though we know 3/4 of them are going to need it. They acknowledge it. People know that it's happening all around them. They see it with their friends and family. But actually planning for it financially is another story. And I blame the financial community in part because the studies show that only 7% of advisors are talking about this, which to me is just mind-boggling malpractice, because, again, this is a number one time bomb that's going to blow up people's retirement plans. So we absolutely have got to start these conversations about Medicare, about skilled health care and the non-skilled custodial care. And so that's Medicare planning and that's long-term care planning. It should be in the very earliest stages of your retirement planning that this is addressed. Because you know what happens, by the way? If you know what happens if you don't deal with this? If you're in that 97% of Americans that have not already created some form of formal funding, that 97% of Americans have chosen by default to pay 100% of those future unfunded costs, those unknown future costs they have not funded. So they've chosen by default to pay 100% of those future unknown costs. That is scary. Try to get your mind around that. Yeah. So we have to address these things. I mean, it's total malpractice in my mind. If an advisor has, I mean, have people come, we do classes just on long-term care down at the college, and we certainly talk about it in our 6-hour classes and all that we do, these series of classes. And so many people say, well, why haven't I heard about this before? And I'm just dumbfounded in saying, I don't know. How long have you been with your advisor? And they'll say 10, 20 years. And I'm saying, and in all that time, they've never talked about healthcare and long-term care. And they say, no. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, it's time for a new advisor, and I don't want to be rude, but holy cow, if all they're trying to do is gather your assets and move on to some other person's assets, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if they got you a 1% greater rate of return if you lost it all to healthcare costs that were never addressed. So it's not about getting a 0.5% or 1% greater return. It's about planning for the greatest unfunded social crisis of our time. We always invite people to come in. Let's have that healthcare conversation. Let's put it in the context of your long-term plan. Let us show you ways to multi-purpose your existing dollars so that they can address multiple needs in the future. Since none of us have a crystal ball where life's going, come visit with us. We'll show you how to get more bang for your dollar. We'll show you how to use other people's money, often insurance companies' money, to pay for things that you really can't afford on your own.
Investment advisory services offered through Golden Years Financial LLC, a registered investment advisory firm. Insurance is offered through Golden Years Insurance Services. These firms do not provide legal or tax advice. Consult your own legal and tax advisors before taking actions that may have tax implications. Investing in securities involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Insurance contracts' principal protection is based on the claim-paying ability of the respective insurer. None of the information contained on this website shall constitute an offer to sell or solicit to buy a security or insurance product. The information and opinions contained on this site or requested from this site are provided by third parties believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed. They are provided for informational purposes only and are not a solicitation to buy or sell any of the products mentioned. Any media logos and or trademarks contained herein are the property of their respective owners, and no endorsement by those owners of Mark Cordner, Golden Years Financial, or Golden Years Insurance is stated or implied.